I just want to say though, just as a small disclaimer, yeah. Welcome back to another Tea Talk Tuesday video. I am so grateful for all the support and all the love on my previous video. Big up Nordia B, who said to me, girl, these conversations are too rich, too wonderful, and them not get enough crowd over here on IG, so please to follow through and put them on YouTube. And I am like, of course, I totally agree. So this video and all my previous videos will be uploaded to Tea Talks on YouTube. Now, our previous video, we started a conversation. You know, me just saying why I thought it advantageous to wait for sex until marriage. And so we just want to further that discussion today. And I think it's gonna be an exciting one. I just want to say though, just as a small disclaimer, yeah. And I think this is the perfect segue. So if you see, sorry, all right? not sorry. Married woman can do what I want, all right? Okay, including this. Okay, anyway. But yeah, the first thing I want to talk about is how some people feel like marriage is the biggest scam, the biggest chopper right now. Top chopper, chop. That's how it go. Sorry, you know me. I always try to stay baseline, grassroots, and have the conversations inclusive. I want everybody to feel like they can be a part of these talks. And so that means I have to keep my ear to the ground. I have to stay where things are current. And so yeah, that's me, right? But yeah, I understand. I get it. I get why a lot of women feel like, yo, no, it's the biggest chop, it's the biggest scam. And right now, if Sarah and Russell get divorced tomorrow, that's it. I do not believe in marriages. I'm done. I'm not looking to get married. I'm just gonna do my thing. Let's date and travel the world as best as possible. Maybe have some little kids, but I'm not doing this, right? I get it. Popular culture, TV shows, sitcoms, all of these things are geared towards an agenda, and that agenda tells us that their marriages are lame, you know, husbands are bound to cheat, women are bound to become unhappy, you know, it just don't make no sense. Mother follow up the marriage thing, you know, oh, your wife control you. There are just so many different themes in so many different movies and shows that try to really and truly annihilate the sanctity and the beauty of marriage. We know that there's an agenda there. I don't know why, but there is, right? We also have seen where there's been an over fantasizing of it, where there's this fairy tale-esque kind of mentality where marriage is concerned, and we know, you and I know, it's not real, right? There's no perfect relationship. There is no, you know, knight in shining armor coming to save any of us. That is what's in the person of Jesus Christ. But anyway, that's just my personal belief. But yeah, so there's either the complete degradation of marriage or the over fantasizing of marriage, which is another conversation. Commercial break. So yeah, I get it. I can get where healthy marriages seem like a rarity today. They do exist. Although media and all the other things try to make it seem like they don't work. Marriages don't work out. Marriages don't work out. Failure, divorces, divorce rates, all these different things. But believe me, there are so many people, guys, so many people, and we have to hold that hope. What is life without hope, right? I do understand, I get it, but you know, there are social constructs that we have to fight against. Something that we can all agree, something that is very common but is not at all normal, and we should not trivialize and should not accept, is that we are raising wives. A lot of our, especially Caribbean women, our mothers, make it you know, it's a focus to ensure that you are wife material, that when you grow up you can catch a man. But in the same breath, we are not raising husbands. That's the truth. And a lot of millennial parents are trying to change, are moving the status quo, changing the tide to now make a concerted effort to raise husbands, to make sure that our boys grow into men, grow into husbands. We have to put more focus on that. So I get it. You have a lot of girls walking around with all these wifely abilities and capacities but not a lot of men walking around with the information, the wisdom to be a good husband. And that's something that we have to tackle first and foremost. There's so much going on. There's more than meets the eye, I'll just say that. But yes, it's not a rarity, it's not a unicorn. There are people that are a part of healthy, beautiful marriages, right? The next point I wanted to make is that one of the things that is affecting men and women too in terms of their pursuit of relationship and marriage is a lack of identity, right? We or boys, as I was saying in my earlier point, are not being raised with husband standards. They're not being taught how to be husbands, and part of that is because a lot of our men are not even raised by their fathers, right? And so what you have is moms who are saying, go hang out with your uncles them and your older cousins them and let them teach you how to be a man because I can't. And so a lot of the times the example is poor, right? And so we're not the generations being born in families that are, you know, single parent homes or no parent at all, or, you know, whatever is happening, there's just so much surrounding that, and so there's a lack of identity. And also for women too, you know, we are affected. I did my final year show when I was graduating college about being a daughter to an absentee father and the effects that had on me. And so even my understanding of my identity and my place in the world, and, you know, my self-esteem and self-worth, and all of that warped and wrapped into a situation where pursuing a relationship and doing so in a healthy way, you know, is almost impossible, right? And so because we have so many people walking around trying to decipher life on their own, having no great example, some people are able to, by way of connecting with, you know, a higher source, which is our God, have been able to kind of define, yeah, and even others too who are not necessarily believers have been able to find themselves into marriage. And John Piper spoke about that so eloquently, and I'll share more about who John Piper is and that little snippet of a podcast that I got earlier that I have here to share. Another point I have is that toxicity is the order of the day. And it leads to the point I made before. Because the examples were poor, and because our men have seen toxic traits in the men that they are now following the examples of, it just continues to permeate the room. It just continues to be the order of the day. And so what happens is a lot of men use toxicity to prove their manhood. And so I have a lot of girlfriends because I'm trying to prove that I'm a man. I treat women a certain way because I'm trying to prove my bravado, my manliness, my masculinity. And it just continues to, you know, this hamster wheel of toxicity. And so our women are seeing this and we're just like, really? Wow. Situation after situation, relationship after relationship, this is what we're encountering. Men that never had the right examples to begin with and now are displaying terrible toxicity towards women. I want to go into what marriage is. And as sharing earlier, John Piper, who is a longtime author and a theologian who I love and rate dearly, he says God ordained that there be human institutions, and one of those institutions, as an example, is government. He explains in Romans 13, 1-7 and 1 Peter 2, 13-17, and he teaches that governments are real. They're real governments and they accomplish many of his good purposes, even when the emperor and the governors are unbelieving. So everything these governors and emperors do is sin in their unbelief, right? Because they don't do it from faith. And yet that doesn't stop God from recognizing the governments as real, God ordained institutions of government accomplishing his purposes. In the same way, God ordained the institution of marriage, and it too accomplishes many of God's purposes, even when the husband and wife are unbelievers, like providing replenishment for the earth, some measure of stability against chaos, some semblance of the covenant love that God intended marriage to portray. So I just want to speak on this little section here that says what the purpose of marriage is, whether it is between believers or unbelievers, because I just want to give credence to this thing of marriage. It is one, providing replenishment for the earth, some measure of stability in doing that, right? We all know about the baby mother drama. We all know that it can be, some people have thrived beautifully at having mixed families, right? In terms of stepfathers and stepsons and stepmothers, we've seen it can be done. But I'm just saying, in a large majority, we've seen where there's a lot of chaos when there is families being started, and then, you know, there is no real stability there can be chaos, right? And also the point of marriage is to have some semblance of the covenant love that God intended for marriage to portray. The ultimate purpose of marriage, according to Genesis 2:24 and Ephesians 5:32, is to portray the covenant love between Christ and his church. This is done most clearly in an obedient, faithful Christian marriage, but it is done obscurely even in a lifelong, promise-keeping, adultery-avoiding, unbelieving marriage. So marriages accomplish some of God's purposes imperfectly, even when the spouses are unbelieving. And so somebody would say to me, so even if I'm not a Christian and I want to get married, right? Does that, you know, take away from my marriage? Am I not entering into a marriage because I'm not a believer? All of those questions, no. The truth is, even if you are not a believer, right, you are still somewhere, somehow working a part of God's general plan. Marriages, whether between believers and unbelievers, do one thing: they accomplish God's purposes. In a believing marriage, it accomplishes God's purposes perfectly. And in an unbelieving marriage, it still accomplishes God's purposes, but it may be in an imperfect way. But let me tell you, there's really and truly, as I tell you, marriage, there are really no words to explain or express what God does to each individual in a marriage, right? A lot of us think that, for instance, let me use this as an example. Proverbs 31 in the Bible talks about a woman in a marriage that is, she works hard, her husband trusts her with all his heart, she makes great decisions, she's diligent, she's a hard worker, all of these things, she's bossed up, right? But she was always bossed up, even before she became this man's wife, right? She was a boss from before. She was diligent from before. A lot of people are seeking marriages to be their savior, seeking for a partner to be their savior. But we have to remember, we cannot control people. A lot of women want to get married for the sole purpose of controlling a man, right? But my dear, you can control no one but yourself. We can only control our own actions, our own thoughts, our own emotions. We cannot control those of others, right? And so when you look at marriage that way, when you look at marriage as being your savior, you know, as filling a void that only God can fill, that is also why a lot of marriages fail, right? So I just wanted to say that. But marriage, as I said, I think is one of the only things on this earth that truly is a tool that God can use to bring you closer to understanding yourself and understanding him. Yeah. So there's lots more to be said, but marriage is rooted in God's design for creation at the beginning and is a valid institution for all his human creatures. You know, I think God works best through marriage because of what it reveals to us about ourselves. I think that's what the primary tool of marriage is. It absolutely is not, you know, the fantasy that they're selling in Hallmark movies, but it does carry some of that beauty. Of course, it does. But there's, as I say, there's a spectrum, and sometimes we tarry on either ends as opposed to just that nice middle ground where there is a bit of ugliness and there is a bit of beauty, and that together is what creates that wonder that marriage is. So be encouraged, friends. Let me know if you are a staunch believer that your marriage is a chop, is a scam, and you just don't think it's worth it anymore, or if you are a romantic, you really and truly are just waiting for that, you know, person that will best suit you, and you really believe that you will wait for sex and all of the other things that come with marriage when you are married, until you are married, right? So yeah, I hope this was a great conversation. I hope that you know, there have been some good points in it, and if you have a point to add, please drop it right down there in the comments. I will be looking out for it, and I will definitely give you a shout out in my video to follow. All right, enough love, walk good, God bless you.